Okay, now I think we'll throw it open to the audience participation. We'll have 2 or 3 questions together. Make them brief, please. And yes, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent. I just wanted to ask, there was no discussion on India's Look East policy. And I'd like to hear your opinions on that. I think the Indian government under Modi has looked out now, and I think that's a very vital relationship with the rising Asia, which is taking over. And people don't understand this, but it's taking over the world as a rising area, and it will beat the West, including the Americans, very soon. Thank you.
Anybody else? We can take 2 questions, 3 questions together. Okay. While you think of the questions, Dr. Rajamohan, would you like to take it? We have a chapter done by Professor Tata Yong in the book. He talks about India and the ASEAN relationship, and he's dwelt at length. We'll have Professor Rajamohan.
You're right. I think that so many subjects, not everything gets covered. As I said, Professor Khan's piece on India's Look East policy is a pretty important one. But there's no question again, I think, that India turned its back on the East. After the Bandung conference, India became more focused on non-alignment and global issues. It was nicer to be in Manhattan, New York, talking about the global issues, while actually it was disconnecting itself from within Asia. And I think what happened in '91, I think as India began to globalize, the first place it turned to was the East. That's where I think the contribution of Singapore and Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong, who saw that India can be shepherded back into a global order. I think the contribution of Manmohan Singh in one of his latest speeches acknowledged Singapore's contribution. Just as Singapore contributed to China's globalization in the late 70s, it had an important role. Today, I think the challenge for India, I think, is really, as we look ahead, we've done well. India is now integrated into the ASEAN institutions. But I think it has, in the coming years, we have to finish the RCEP negotiations. But there are many difficult issues between India and ASEAN. Hopefully, in fact, yesterday in Tokyo, they were talking about at least some forward movement. But I think that's an urgent, immediate priority. Second, if the US is retrenching, things are happening in the Korean Peninsula, what kind of a security collaboration that India can do with the ASEAN countries? Prime Minister was here, Modi speaking at the Shangri-La Dialogue. We talked about ASEAN centrality. Good ideas. Now, that those needs to be translated into more effective, more significant security cooperation in the region. So I think the time has come that we can no longer depend on what the Americans do, that we have to do greater cooperation within the region, that is including India, Japan and China. Can we find ways of structuring a new order here that contributes to the interest of everyone?
Thank you. Anybody else? While you think of questions, I will request Dr. Gulati to give us some idea about the announcement made by the Government of India now that they will be paying 50% more to the farmers in terms of the minimum support prices. That's number one. Number two, the government's announcement that they will double farmers' incomes by 2022. What does this entail and how realistic is it?
Well, I think by now the cabinet must have already taken a decision. And, to really respond to your question, we have to understand for the last 3-4 years what has happened to Indian agriculture and to the farmers in particular. When Prime Minister Modi took over the charge, unfortunately, 14-15 and 15-16 turned out to be 2 successive drought years in India. Now, this is the 6th such events since 1900. One was 65, 66, when we had a major change in policy and then revolution came out of that crisis. So similar thing happened in 14, 15, 15, 16, 2 years. Prime Minister Modi had to hit the ground running because it was back-to-back drought. But when he started putting in certain things in action, insurance scheme and major investments in irrigation, 16, 17, 17, 18 production came back to its normal. And today the problem is the prices have collapsed. So it's a problem of plenty. Farmers are throwing their milk on the streets, veggies on the streets. Farmer who was getting 27 rupees a litre for milk in Maharashtra last year is getting 17 rupees today. So there is a major crisis in the farming community, and sensing that it can have a political ramification in the coming elections, he is now very proactive in terms of promising what he actually had promised in his election manifesto, 50% profit over cost. Now, today was the cabinet meeting. Most probably that is what he has changed, the reference of the cost, what is called A to FL, whatever farmers pay from their pocket plus imputed value of their family labor, but not counting the imputed value of rent on his own land or imputed value of his interest on his own capital. And these two types of costs, there is a 38% difference. So he has taken the lower cost and he has promised 50% MSP, minimum support prices, to be higher than that. Now the challenge is CACP recommends and government announces 23 commodities for minimum support price. And the reality is, not even for wheat and rice, it can give assured prices for more than 5 or 6 states. Punjab is a lucky one where over time they have built a procurement system, Punjab, Haryana, Andhra Pradesh, and last 5 years Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. But all other states, prices may remain below minimum support price. And that is happening in most of the pulses, most of the oilseeds, even wheat, rice in Bihar, Assam, they are well below the minimum support price. So your question, he may announce higher minimum support prices. It can give some benefit to those states which are doing real procurement. But how many commodities will the government procure? 23 commodities if they start procuring. The government is not a very good businessman, but it should remain away from business. So that's the challenge. The thinking in the government at present is also whether they can involve the private sector in procurement. But we will commit the mistake of what Europeans did, higher prices and then mountains of butter and lakes of milk. And US did that early in 60s and 70s when they accumulated all those reserves. I'm afraid with very high prices, if you go above international prices, all your exports of rice or cotton at present, which you are largest exporter or second largest exporter, may backfire, and then the government will have to accumulate those stocks. So I'm a little afraid that price policy is not the right way to help the farmers. If you want to help the farmers, direct benefit transfer, direct income support or investment support, because productivity-wise we are still below global standards and way below Chinese standards. That in a way is a safety valve for us, a potential to tap for the next 15, 20 years as our population increases. So we would wish that more investments take place which raise productivity, reduce per unit cost, and that is how profitability of the farmer can come. But that cannot be done within the 10 months remaining for election, and therefore this particular thing. On your other thing, doubling farmers' income, it's a big challenge, it's a big dream, I would say. And Prime Minister Modi is hitching the cart to the sky and asking the bureaucrats and others to deliver. There are many good suggestions and many things that he is doing, but given what is happening in this, the biggest question comes, you will have to increase agriculture growth to almost 12 to 13% per year for the next 5 years. If you want to double farmers' incomes in real terms, your growth rate is normal, hovers around 2.5, 3.5%. Now if you do even 10%, you produce so much, who is going to consume? And can you export internationally? It's not going to be easy. So I would say, good luck. It's a great wish, great dream. I would very much like to see him succeed. But as a professional, it puts several question marks. Where is this surplus going to be absorbed? How much investment is needed? From where that investment will come? I'll be a little skeptical too, given my professional background. But definitely he is pushing, and hopefully agriculture will come back on its track and hopefully do better than its trend rate of growth.
Thank you for that optimistic note. Yeah, you want to, yeah, please.
Yeah, just one couple of questions that I'll just combine very quickly so that it's quick. Talking about the reflecting, 7 decades that we're talking about, so the India's poverty, which has been a concern right from the days when the King George wanted to look at the feet of people, but right to where we are, we still are struggling with a lot of poverty. Of course, farming income will go up, hopefully, as with new policies come in. So that's one challenge that India is still facing, and how we are going to move forward with that to reduce the poverty. And given the challenge that we are having, whole Australia being added to India every year, and that's going to be a strain on housing, food, everything, right? So that's one aspect. Global trade is the other challenge, which where we see countries looking inward, and we are having bilaterals between China and other countries. And where do we see ourselves in that whole ecosystem when China's dominance has really created so much challenge? And thirdly, to Professor Rajamohan's point on things happen in India at its own pace, then there's the jugaad factor as well. But if India, as Dr. Gulati said, looks forward to doing something, it will do it the way they did it for the revolution. So how do we move forward? Because the negativity mindset is still very large in India right now, that's pulling the whole political as well as the social environment big time. So how is that going to be changing or affecting the way people are doing things, or making an effort to having a positive impact on the environment and the nature? Thanks.
You have a question also?
My question is, what do you think at this juncture is the biggest opportunity that India has? And what do you think is the biggest threat that India faces at this moment?
Thank you. Now, okay, let me add one more to this so that the three panelists can address these. Dr. Gulati talked about elections. We are going to be having general elections in 2019. 3 states, 3 very important states are also likely to go before election in the current year. That is Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh. Sorry, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh. And talk has arisen again, I saw it this week, for the call for simultaneous elections. I would want Dr. Ranjay to explain on that where is it going to go forward. Let's take up from one side.
When we talk about the challenges, I think time when India can take its own time, shall we say, that is under stress. That when global history is in an accelerating mode, you can keep saying, look, I'll take my time. The fact is, the circumstances, the issues involved are going to change pretty rapidly. So I think the immediate question for India is, if the structure around India is changing rapidly, if the nature of technologies and the economies are changing in the world, how do we take advantage, how do we even prevent the changes from negatively affecting you? Because we've been talking about demographic dividend, right? That India is going to grow, India is the largest manpower. But the question is, if the new technologies are actually going to make it even harder to create jobs, and if you've not been able to do the skilling necessary, then we are in serious trouble. What seemed like a positive factor could turn into a negative factor. But I think the excessive politicization of the domestic debates, I think has tended to curb the urgent need for some unity in the political class, like what we saw for a short while in the 90s. That if you don't reform, if you don't move forward, the consequences are going to be pretty large. And certainly in the international domain, the world is unforgiving. I mean, that you make mistakes or you don't respond in time, the costs of dealing with that later are going to be much more demanding, and I think that's where the challenge is. But I don't think we've fully come to terms with the gravity of the situation that we suddenly beginning to have.
Thank you. Mr. Gulab?
I'll take up this question of poverty. Just to give you a flavor of what the global research tells us, World Bank had taken a massive study of several developing countries and came to one conclusion. I'll summarize that 1% growth in agriculture is at least 2 to 3 times more effective in reducing poverty in developing world compared to same growth coming from other sectors. In case of China, it was 3.5 times more effective because China concentrated first 6 years, 78 to 84, primarily in reforming agriculture. That's the only country in 6 years that doubled farmers' income and half their poverty. 50% reduction in poverty in 6 years. We took 18 years to do that. Our 93 to 11, we halved our poverty, they did it in 6 years because our model was not agriculture driven. Our model was coming from the top of the pyramid, IT power and all those things, then industry, and nobody talked of reforming agriculture till date, right? So it's a trickle-down effect, whereas China fired the economic pyramid from the bottom. It's massive purchasing power with the rural areas that led to TVEs and the industrialization and the manufacturing hub of the world. But if you look what happened to agriculture between 93 and 2004, and then 2004 to 11. 2004 to 11, global prices started going up. In 6, 7, 7, 8, global prices of agriculture erupted. And willy-nilly, India had to follow up that. That increased farmers' income, rural wages were growing in nominal terms at 17-18% per year. And that reduced the poverty 3 times faster between 2004 to 11 than between 93 to 2004, right? At present, the latest survey, 17-18, has been just completed on 30th of June. Those results will take another year to come out. We are hoping that poverty will be even going down further. In fact, Brookings has come out with a paper that dramatically even faster decline in poverty. Sujit Balla has come up with his own thing. But all said and done, we have followed more a gradual decline in poverty. I think in the next 10 years, your challenge will be not as much poverty, but as much nutrition. You will have to work towards that now. It's a long haul, yes, but absolute poverty that people are going hungry and not getting food, or that type of situation will be more or less controlled, and we will be in single digits, hopefully, in poverty numbers of 17, 18.
Dr. Anjay, your prognosis on elections?
No, I just like to tackle your question on simultaneous elections. Prognosis is very dangerous in the Indian context. Originally, I guess, the state assembly elections and the national, the parliament elections were being held together. It was only in 57 the incident I mentioned when the communists won in Kerala, and Congress gets voted out, and then subsequently in the 60s when Congress uses a host of state elections, that the state and the national elections go out of sync. And then, of course, India had early elections in 1971 under India and under the Congress split. So since then, several states have been having the elections at a different time from the national elections. And periodically this thought has come up that India should have simultaneous elections, and this has been also as part of the latest Law Commission report has recommended that India should have simultaneous elections. And the logic, one, is that it is far more cost effective to have elections at one time, both national elections and district elections, though logistically it's actually an enormous task in terms of having adequate security forces, etc. on the ground. The second rationale is that the fact that if you have elections all the time also skews your public policy and thinking. So you would rather have elections every 5 years to rationalize the electoral structure. But I think specifically why this has become such an important topic now, I think, is that, and this has been a thought articulated not just by the Law Commission but also by various BJP leaders, including the Prime Minister himself, is I think the BJP under Mr. Narendra Modi is a far more, in the campaigning and the structure, far more presidential than, say, the Congress or other parties. And it will be to the BJP's benefit if they can have the state elections and the national elections together, where they project Prime Minister Mr. Modi as a leader who stands for the country. So I think for the BJP it makes eminent sense to push this line of thinking, whereas for the others, I think not so much. So I think that's why specifically the decision has come up over the last few months.
Thank you, Vendra. We have time for one last question. Okay, one. Yes. Please, go ahead.
We heard about economic reforms of the 1990s, right down to electoral reforms of maybe the 2020s, and a lot of other things in between. But these are piecemeal things. What is India's own grand narrative about itself? If we were to benchmark, not benchmarking to the west, but to the north, Mr. Xi Jinping talks about the comprehensive rejuvenation of the Chinese civilization. Do we have anything equivalent in India? And let me connect it not to some very grand theory, but the history of my own family. 8 generations back, my forefathers migrated from Bikaner to what is Western UP, hoping for a better future. 50 years back, my grandfather had to move out from there to what is Uttarakhand now. 10 years back, from Uttarakhand, I came over to Singapore. And if you drive in a 200-kilometer radius around Delhi, you're back in the 17th century. I'm being very blunt. My entire extended family of about 18, 19 smaller units have all migrated out of Western India. I don't dare to go back there. And nobody seems to address that elephant in the room. Coming back again, what is India's grand narrative about itself?
India is not to the extent I understand, there are problems. All of us move out, also come back also because the soil gets you back, right? There are problems, but India evolves, and there is no one-directional thing. India is a multi-directional thing, because there are so many communities, so many cultures, so many thinking, and you have to allow that to flourish. You should see where India as a whole, is it regressing or is it moving forward? At least in the sector that I study, where we were and where we are today, there is a spectacular change. That doesn't mean that there are no hungry people or poverty is finished and everything. Yes, there are challenges. But compared to 60s or 50s or even 70s, India is totally different. Even 91, you had just $1.2 billion for 15 days. Today you have more than $400 billion in your, We don't have 4 trillion or 3 trillion, but 400 billion gives you much resilience compared to where we were. So you look at the milestones that India has come up with. Look at trade. Dr. Mohan was saying overall trade is 1 trillion in a GDP of 2.6 trillion. Now that's a huge integration with the world. So you cannot, one experience or one corner or other corner cannot be generalized for India as a whole. And there are pockets of distress, but there are pockets where every week people are going out and getting their laundry even in Paris. So India is very, very, I think there is some inherent vibrancy in the system. It's moving on, and you don't see the change within 1 year or 1 month or 3 months. But anybody coming after 5 years to India, see, my heavens, it's bumper to bumper cars, you don't have even roads. So, and just 15 years back it used to be only Maruti and this and that. Maruti is finished. It's all now, look at, so people are progressing. And I think it's up to you what your experience, I don't know. We came in India, if you narrated your personal story, we came in India as refugees. And the first place in India was a refugee camp. We were given a tent, and there were 3 graves in the tent. It was a graveyard. That's where we started our living. We came from Pakistan during partition. And I went to Pakistan after 50 years, to look back at my home, my mother's brothers. You look at that, and the education that we got. My eldest sister is a double MD in US, a doctor. I could study to the best. Our own, so I feel so committed that what India has done as a personal family level, it's a remarkable change that it could give that opportunity to people who are refugees. And we have risen to one of the best. I was the youngest advisor to Prime Minister Vajpayee at that time. So every story is different, and India is very wide. And with cultures, UP, particularly your area, I don't know how that has performed, but there are people, look at what Punjab did during Green Revolution, and then they went out, and what they are doing in California and others. So people have moved around and they have come back also.
Two paradoxes, I think. One is the grand narrative. I would say yes and no. Sometimes grand narrative helps to focus the energies of people. Sometimes it doesn't. That today what Xi Jinping might say, if the trade war takes off, we're going to see all kinds of things happen in this world. So it's good to, as a mobilization tactic, grand narrative is useful. But in the end, the elite does not judge its internal and external circumstances well and develop a practical strategy, which is what, say, Deng Xiaoping did for 40 years. I think phenomenal transformation that has taken place. But yet, at the same time, if you overestimate your strengths, then you might find yourself into more difficult issues. For India, I think the problem has been that there's been a difficulty for the political class to set goals and then try and stick to them. Deng Xiaoping came and said 20 years, 4 times the GDP. Now in India, nobody set that goal, but we did increase it to say 3 times from 91 to now. So, and the structure of Indian politics also prevents that. So I would say, if you look at India today, it's the 3rd largest economy, 5th in nominal terms, 5th largest defense budget. There are huge islands where extraordinary things are happening. And the things you said about Western UP or different parts where there are huge problems, both are true. But the fact is, are we on a net trajectory of improvement? I think we are. Is the pace good enough? It's not. And that's why I think the challenge for people like us, those who have been in the government, for those who are chattering classes, is to keep nudging a fundamentally difficult society to govern into taking the right steps forward. And I sense is what we've achieved in the last 7 years gives you reason to optimism. but what it needs is more purposefulness, more decisiveness of the kind that they often miss.
While I take this opportunity to thank my panelists, I'd like to close by saying that, look, it was alluded to that India lived from ship to mouth. In 1991, India had to literally send out 40 tons of gold to get some foreign exchange. We experimented with coalition governments, and today we are the third largest or fourth largest economic power in the world today. I would commend you that come to Delhi, spend some time within 100 kilometers of Delhi, and you'll find much that is happening. But most important is that a vibrant democracy has delivered. And the fact that we can stand up, each one of us, take pot shots at the government and tell the government where it is going wrong, that is the strength of India, that's the resilience of India. And the government listens, may act, may not act, but it is forced to listen to all these voices, and that, I think, is the strength of India. I take this opportunity to thank each one of our panelists. They have been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Roy, and our distinguished panelists for such an insightful sharing. May I invite the panelists to take their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to have with us our guest of honor for today, Dr. Janil Puthucheary, Senior Minister for State, Minister for Communications and Information, and Ministry of Transport. We will now continue with the proceedings and take our tea break at the end of the event. At this point, I would like to invite Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Chairman, ISAS and US, to say a few words. Ambassador Pillai, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not my practice to make two appearances in one evening. I'm not paid for that. But I make an exception today because our honored guest, Dr. Janil Puthucheary, because of other commitments, his ministerial commitments, he could not make it to the first part. So I thought I will take a few minutes of your time to just put into context who he is and what he stands for. We have heard quite a lot on India and how strongly our panelists discuss India's challenges, but also what India has achieved. Being a born and bred Singaporean, I also have a story to tell about Singapore. And that's where Dr. Janil Puthucheary comes in. Because he is here with his parents, his father and mother. They have a very distinguished place in Singapore's history. And I know his father longer than Janil knows his father. Right. And as a student, he was one of the inspirations that I had. The only person in this room who would probably know him is Mr. Jumapur, because he was also in politics at that time, and they knew each other. Dr. Janil Puthucheary's uncle, Mr. Dominic Puthucheary, father's elder brother, was one of the most distinguished economists of Singapore. The first book he wrote, it came out like a bestseller, Ownership and Control of the Economy of Singapore. It was a popular belief that Singapore was owned by a few Chinese families. And he debunked that theory, and to say that it was actually controlled entirely by British companies, foreign companies. It caused quite a lot of unhappiness. Mr. James Puthucheary, the uncle, went in and out of jail many a time during the time of the British, because he was arrested for sedition, he was arrested for all sorts of things, but each time he came out. But when the theory was formed, could be fake news, it could be true.
but I think it is true that PAP was coming into power. It was, well, sort of very sure PAP was gaining popularity at the ground and therefore they would be elected in 1959. There was a document produced by the PAP called the Task Ahead. It was written largely by Dr. Gokeng Sui. But Dr. Gokeng Sui used to visit the prison to consult James on how to structure it and what. The two super brains together worked on the task ahead. You can go to the library, you can get it. I was a student, I knew about it. And Dominic was one of the young leaders of the trade union movement, very well known, one of the heroes of the revolution that it was, the social revolution that was taking place. A little story, personal story, if I may tell, how Dominic almost got me into trouble. We were discussing salary scales in, generally salary scales. And we found that there was one British company, I don't want to name it, it's still around. The salary for clerical workers was $50 a month, 50 Singapore dollars a month. So we say, how does a family live on 50? Even in those days, it's far too little. And then we found that clerical staff was entirely limited to Malays and Indians. The Chinese would move to other, they won't accept $50, they would rather go and do business somewhere. So we looked at this, and then there was a discussion at one of the units, which Dominic used to chair together with Mr. S.T. Bani. They found that we had not enough evidence to come to a conclusion. So it was decided that we will do a survey of all the foreign companies to see what the salary scales were. Because exploitation was very rampant and we wanted to make sure that this is known to the Singapore public. So we decided, we went to see the Minister for Labour, Mr. K.M. Byrne, and he said this is fantastic. It was decided that a group of university students, including yours truly, we had a club called the University Socialist Club. They decided to do a survey on the salary scale. And the unions will work on the format of the survey and how the questions are termed and so on. We just deliver, get the answers. And when the minister got involved, he blessed it. He said this was a fantastic initiative and so on. It came out in the papers. Next day, while I was walking along the quadrangle in Bukit Timah campus, I got a young man coming to me saying, Vice Chancellor wants to see you. I thought this was fantastic, Vice Chancellors don't see little students. So I thought it was something good. But when I entered the room, there was a very angry Sir Alexander Oppenheim, our name of our Vice Chancellor. The first question he asked me, what the hell do you think you're doing? So I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Then he said, you are doing this survey. You don't even have a degree. You're just a student. What the hell do you think you're doing? So I tried to calm him. I told him that people who have finished secondary education normally do the survey. The people who write the survey, that's a different. People who interpret the survey, they are all qualified people. But to do a survey, you don't need a university qualification. So I thought it was all right. He said, all rubbish. Who are you telling you? Then he cut the conversation short. He said, okay, I'm instructing you to stop this survey. Will you obey me? I said, I'm a student of the university. I think I have little choice. Good that you realize that. And the survey was stopped. The reason for this to happen was because the International Chamber of Commerce, which was totally dominated by the international business community, felt threatened that revealing these details. Here, one question he asked me was, why is that you don't survey the Chinese? I said, I don't understand the accounts. they have maybe 3 sets of books or 4 sets of books. It's going to be extremely difficult. Whereas whatever you might say about the Western side, they probably have only 1 set, they have auditors and so on. So it was much easier to do. He was amused by my answer, so my survey stopped. And the man who almost got me into trouble was Janil's father. So I just wanted to give you, contextualize the role played by the Puthucheary family in Singapore's independence and social development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai. I would now like to invite Dr. Amitendu Palit, Senior Research Fellow and Research Lead, Trade and Economics, Institute of South Asian Studies, NUS, to introduce the publication. Dr. Palit, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and a warm welcome to Dr. Puthucheary. Thank you so much for gracing the occasion. We have had an extensive discussion about India in this very enriching conversation that we had from the distinguished panelists earlier. And Mr. Vinod Rai, the co-editor of this book, has also given you a brief outline about the content of the book. What I would like to share with you are some of the major messages or lessons or experiences that have been captured by this book. And before I share this with you, let me also give a little bit of a context, in the sense that 7 decades of India means a huge amount and is probably a bit abstract to visualize, because India itself is very large and complex. And 7 decades is a very long period to contextualize a large and complex country like India. So the implicit theme and focus of the book, in a sense, had to be somewhere at the core. And we picked up policies, particularly public policies and institutions, as what would be the implicit core of the book. So all the chapters that have been written in the book, either significantly or at least peripherally, touch upon public policies along the subjects that we discuss and exhibit. So what I would share with you in terms of the larger messages that comes out from this exercise that we undertook, and this is by and large the impressions that we gather from most of the chapters that have been written, as well as the introduction that Mr. Rai and I have contributed to the book, are in the context of this public policy context. The first important lesson that I think I'd like to identify in this context is extremely important role of technology in India's 7 decades of development. Now, today's India is impossible to visualize without technology, not just because of the fact that it has the fastest growth in mobile subscribers in the world, and the fact that it has the largest number of subscription to the social media platform called Facebook. But it is also because of the fact that it's just not an occasion for today, but even from the 50s, 60s and 70s, India had a very close association with technology, which has been felt at every level of the big leaps that it has taken. Dr. Gulati alluded to Green Revolution, subsequently Operation Flood. All were substantively results of path-breaking technological applications in the fields of agriculture. And today it seems really, really remote that it was in 1986 when, for the first time, the then Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi actually brought in computers. It's just 30 years, but the degree and the distance that India has come during that time in terms of application of technology in its various fields is remarkable. Now, what we see coming out from the book in the context of technology are three important things. First, the role of technology in improving public service delivery in India is very significant. And wherever public service delivery has actually improved beyond expectations or is functioning in a way in which it benefits most, the role of technology has been extremely important. The second is, and it's also another very interesting lesson to be picked up, technology has also changed the functional character of many institutions. Most important among this is probably Indian media, which has undergone a phenomenal change in the way it functions. And there are papers written in the book by experts like Professor Robin Jeffrey, who take a look at the changes that Indian media has undergone and which even now continues to remain a very large producer of print media. But from there, the way that Indian media houses have undergone changes in their characters to shift to technological platforms. None of these are inconsistent with the global changes, but the fact is, in India, these changes have been quiet but have been very substantive. And along with these institutions, there have also been changes in communication, and most significantly, political communication. In today's India, a very significant number of political communication within politicians and their constituencies, and also across the political spectrum, takes place through the medium of technology, and principally through social media. And finally, in this context, the very important role of technology has produced a new series of public policy challenges, and the most important of which are probably in the fields of employment and jobs. But there are also other public policy challenges that are coming up and which are getting to be manifested increasingly in the areas of biometric identification like Aadhaar and the data security and so on and so forth. The second important message that comes out are the great salience of two natural resources in the context of India and its public policy. The first of this is land. There are several chapters in the book, including the one that Dr. Gulati has written, which alludes to land, because land is just not important as a factor of production. Land has also been important in determining the political economy of India, the social organizations in India, and also the degree of economic and social inequalities and equalities in India. To that extent, land has also probably been the area which has been a huge public policy challenge and where the ability of public policy to deliver has been rather limited. And one of the examples of that is that India continued with a more than a century-old acquisition policy till it was revised only 5 years ago. Now, even that revision has also probably not got land to where the public policy and connected actors would have wanted it to be. There are issues over who would manage land, who would control land, who would control real estate, because today the real estate has come to define a very significant part of the Indian economy and the Indian society, including the Indian political class, which has experienced the growth of politicians based on real estate. While land as a natural resource has therefore been a challenge for public policy, there is another natural resource over which the narrative has been extremely powerful, extremely engaging in India, and that's energy. There has not been any shortage of conversation on energy, no shortage of committees, issues, discourses, conversations on energy, because energy is just not a question of domestic economic security, it has external geopolitical, geostrategic characters as well. And energy is something which has evolved over time in terms of the new challenges that it has brought up, essentially in terms of carbon emission, environment, and so on and so forth. But this, in contrast to land, while having had tremendous amount of conversation, has also left and brought us to a point to ponder whether India actually has been able to arrive at a cohesive energy policy. So energy, again, is a factor which has come back repeatedly in the various chapters that we have had written in the book. The third point, it's not often alluded to, though it's very, very obvious. When we talk about India, we tend to think most prominently about its non-state actors. I think we regret the fact that we did not have a chapter on Bollywood in India, but we are extremely glad that we could have a chapter on sports, because much of India is known by its sports, either by its lack of achievement or its achievements, depending upon which character and side of sports we are talking about. Indian media statistics are captured in the book, which shows that it's actually the largest media industry in the world. It has almost 1,000 audio-visual channels, beating 24/7 across the country. And this is not to talk about the print media. We have a very interesting chapter in this book on civil society organizations and their relationship with the government. And when we talk about the non-state actors, again, another area which has come back contextually in the context of public policy is the diaspora. And we have also figured out that when it comes to important social services like healthcare, education, skills, the role of non-state actors has been very, very fundamental. But the challenge for public policy has been to harmoniously utilize the non-state actors, and it will remain a challenge probably. The relationship between the government and civil society, to what extent private investment and non-state actors should be permitted in sensitive areas like healthcare, education, and so on and so forth, have become very important issues when it comes to construction of regulations. The fourth message, again, a very under-discussed subject, but I think there's no denying the fact, I think Mr. Rai will be the first one to agree with me. Today's India has been very prominently shaped by its bureaucracy. The India that we get to see in various respects has been a product of the way the civil servants and bureaucrats have contributed to that development. Bureaucracy in India, 9 times out of 10, is alluded to in a negative and cynical fashion. But there are probably examples of projects. Let's say, for example, the midday meals, which took off in Tamil Nadu in the early 80s, have subsequently been a great source of cheap and quality nutrition across the country. A model that has been emulated in many districts and pockets would not have probably happened without the wholesome effort of some very sincere bureaucrats. And even today, initiatives like the Delhi Metro are not mentioned without the contribution of that one single man, Mr. Sridharan, who actually made this possible. So there are shining examples of solid, positive bureaucratic contribution. At the same time, there is a lot of cynicism, probably justified, about the role that bureaucracy could have played, about the role that bureaucracy should have played, about the way in which bureaucracy has been reluctant to release terms, and about the way bureaucracy has also been resistant to infusion of lateral talent. And I think we have tried to do justice to this debate because both Mr. Rai and I have been parts of the civil service earlier, so we have seen it both from inside and outside. To some extent, we have tried to rationalize this in the way we have brought this into the larger sections, and there have also been very interesting chapters, primarily the one written by Dr. S. Narayan, another former economic advisor to Prime Minister Vajpayee, where the bureaucracy and the role in India has been summarized very well. The fifth message, the institutions. I don't think institutions were really a very prominent part of the debate and discourse surrounding India for 20, 30 years after its independence, as they are now. Another issue over here is that there are many institutions in India today which didn't exist before. Let's say, for example, the regulator of the media, Prasar Bharati. Now, for the largest media industry of the world and the Prasar Bharati, the role that it plays is significant, but not much is available in the public domain in terms of objective discussion about what it has contributed. It's only in a very limited extent today that We know about the extremely important role which Securities and Exchange Board of India have played in fashioning the growth of the Indian capital market, which, by the way, has been one of the major lifelines of India's small and medium households for several years now. And there have also been occasions of regulatory shortcomings, institutional failures, the most principal of which is the situation of Indian banks. Two successive points of financial crises, 1998 and 2008, Indian banks were eulogized for the fact that they were protected from the global turbulence, and they were looked at as great sources of virtue. Today that faith in Indian banks is shaking. But banks have been extremely important part of Indians and their existence, both in terms of daily existence as well as developmental progress. Now, are these institutions going to go ahead in a manner in which they should fulfill their broader objectives? Would the replacement of Planning Commission by NITI Aayog serve the objectives for which it is delineated? I think these are some of the questions which come in multiple contexts in the book's various chapters. Two last points. One, India and the world. Professor Rajamohan alluded to India's globalization. There are several chapters in this book which alludes to India's globalization, not just from the perspective of economic globalization, but I think this is the strength of the book. This is where globalization is studied both from an economic as well as a strategic and geopolitical perspective. And the interesting point over here is the contrast between two trajectories is very, very evident. Dr. Subbarao, the former governor of Reserve Bank of India, in his paper in this book argues that employing a variety of indicators, India is found to be far more globalist than either the United States of America or China. At the same time, there are also visions as to whether India has been able to correspond this degree of economic integration that it has had with the rest of the world in terms of a vision which complements this economic growth through a strategic purpose. And particularly when it comes to India's engagement with a part of the world where we are having this discussion today, that is the Asia-Pacific and India's Act-East policy. Is there a convergence in that regard? I'll leave that answer unanswered because I'm hoping many of you will report it. And finally, what does the book try to end on or begin towards? I think these 7 decades bring one very simple truth to bear. At every point in time when India has faced a crisis, there have been moments where most have felt that India is going to crack, whether it's a crisis on its external border, whether it's a crisis in the management of its food situation, whether it's a crisis on its economic front. There have always been situations when there has been this tendency, this anxiety to conclude that India will crack. And it just doesn't get limited to crisis, even internal factors, issues like the Maoist insurgencies, separation of states on linguistic lines, other agitation. There has been a great tendency on part of the world to conclude that India is going to crack. But India has always held up. And I think the main historical lesson that we draw from this book is that it is resilience, which is seen in their truth. And the lesson or the thought that we would like to leave forward for all of you, that is between Mr. Rai and myself and the rest of the contributors as we look ahead, is that resilience is what has seen India through, and hope is what it will be taken forward on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Palit. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to now invite our guest of honor, Senior Minister of State, Dr. Janil Puthucheary, to deliver his address. Dr. Puthucheary, please.
Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Professor Rajamohan from NUS and ISAS. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you know, when Ambassador Pillai asks you to do some work, you can't say no. And it's not the first time that we've met at a number of functions, but now I understand that his incentive to make me earn my keep goes back several decades. My apologies that I couldn't join you earlier on today. I came in the middle and the panel was engaged in what looked like a fairly robust discussion in response to a question. I didn't catch the question, but I was struck by the energy and enthusiasm at explaining the diversity and depth of the India of today. I was also struck by Professor Mohan's comment towards the end, two comments he made. One was about the nature of democracy, and are we going in the right direction, I think was the way he phrased it. Could we go faster? Could we do better? I'm not a political scientist, I'm a politician, which is almost the opposite. But I would argue that the tension between the direction a democracy goes in and the idea that there are people within that democracy who feel that more can be done is almost a defining characteristic of a functioning democracy. And I was very heartened to hear that. I was especially heartened by one of his last comments where he made the distinction between the government or the chattering classes. As a member of the government, I'm very glad he said or rather than and. But let me get on with my formal comments. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm very happy to join you in this launch of this publication, edited by Mr. Vinod Rai and Dr. Amitendu Palit, and bringing together many distinguished experts, academics with extensive knowledge on South Asian studies. And I'd especially like to commend the Institute of South Asian Studies for getting involved with such a distinguished grouping and for taking the initiative to publish this book. Looking back at 7 decades of a country as large and as complex and as diverse as India, you have to argue is a Herculean task. Just as we talked about the diversity that exists in India today, the richness and the diversity of those 7 decades of history, almost immeasurable. And from today's perspective, 7 decades is long enough to be overwhelming in its detail, but short enough that it is within living memory, which adds a complexity when one has to study it and one has to make choices about the historical perspective, what lessons to draw, what insights to draw, what lessons to reinforce going forward. It's a challenge to pick up those right lessons and those insights, because what has happened over the last 7 decades in India hasn't just changed Indian history. It has had a significant impact on the region and on the world. We've heard today, some of these lessons include the issues of how to maintain harmony in a secular society, how to drive and deepen economic self-reliance, how to manage the trade-offs, sources of energy, the interaction of nuclear technology and the aspirations of the civilian population, how to pursue a robust transformation in terms of the market structure and control of the economy. One particular example, the efforts that India has put into its elections, the largest democratic election in the world, how to just conduct elections in such a context, have been lessons for electoral authorities around the world. No less interesting has been the changing character and the nature of India's external engagement, its role as a global and regional actor. And we've seen this with in very close proximity when Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered the keynote address and articulated the vision that India has today at the Shangri-La Dialogue just last month here in Singapore. The book examines closely these contributions, the history, the lessons learned. And I'm sure it's a volume that will appeal to many people interested in learning more about India. From Singapore's perspective, India's development and progress has been closely followed. Despite the great difference in size, there are a number of similarities in political practices, the role of institutions, the legal systems, our education. And we have been taking note, eagerly, of India's progress, its programs, its policies, and its achievements. There was an Indian fever that swept through Singapore in the 1990s. And since then, both countries have worked hard to deepen and widen cooperation in various spheres of political, strategic, economic, commercial, and civilian engagement. And the results, visible for all to see, and one example, one concrete example of that degree of interlinkage, cooperation and collaboration is the book that's being launched today. The fact that we have here in Singapore an Institute of South Asian Studies that is able to have these types of relationships with journalists, with academics, with experts, bring them together and support such a publication, is a marker of the type of relationship that has been established over the last 7 decades. The testimony to the knowledge and scholarship on India that NUS and ISAS have here and have cultivated over time. Looking forward, what do we hope for? What do we anticipate? What do we see? We anticipate, hope, and would support an economically robust India. And every sign, every indication points to that being so. There are tremendous opportunities for growth and development for India and for Singaporeans in its partnership with India. And the initiatives, the landmark initiatives that India has undertaken, Digital India, Startup India, the efforts around electronic payments and national digital identity, these are the same issues and problems that we are grappling with, albeit on a very different scale. But we look to India to learn the lessons and ask ourselves, how can we apply those lessons to our own journey towards transforming our economy and becoming a small nation? I look forward to a period of sustained cooperation and engagement between India and Singapore. The forward-looking vision, the outward orientation of both countries have brought us both great benefits. We're all keen to learn and learn from each other. We look forward to India being a country that continues to provide examples of progress in scientific development, social progress, creative entrepreneurship. And to that extent, it's important for all of us here in Singapore to know more about India. What she is, what she has gone through, will provide the context of what she will become. So understanding the last 7 decades of independent India will be very important to us. And this book is an excellent place to start. So congratulations to ISAS and the editors, as well as the contributors on this effort to put together this volume. And I'm confident it will provide a deeper insight into understanding how India has evolved and its rise on the global stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Puthucheary. I would now like to invite Dr. Puthucheary, Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, Professor C. Raja Mohan, Mr. Vinod Rai, and Dr. Amitendu Palit on stage for the launch of the book. I would now like to invite Dr. Puthucheary, Mr. Rai, and Dr. Palit to officially launch the book, 7 Decades of Independent India, Ideas and Reflections, with the unveiling of the book. Mr. Rai will now present a copy of the book to our guest of honor, Dr. Puthucheary. We will also have a group photograph. Thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the ISAS book launch and panel discussion.